Welcome everyone. For this demonstration, I'm going to be showing you how to create a face drawn from the front using a traditional canon of proportions. Canon of proportions are a set of rules that tells you how big things ought to be and where they should be placed compared to each other. So the first thing you'll notice is that I have kind of an egg shape drawn on the paper. All my students will get this if you're watching this online and you don't have access to that handout. Simply draw an egg shape to work within. Now, the next thing you'll notice is that there is a center line going through the middle of this drawing. And if it's not entirely visible, you can go ahead and darken that up a little bit. And then you'll notice that there are 3 marks along that center line. The first mark is exactly halfway between the top and bottom of the head, and it's considered to be the eye line. And it's also used for the tops of the ears, to help to place the tops of the ears. So you can very lightly draw that line going across the paper so that you can more clearly work with it. And then there is another line right here. This one is halfway between the eye line and the chin. And so this one is considered to be for the bottom of the nose and for the bottom of the ears along the side of the head. So all you have to do is to simply go ahead and draw that line all the way across as well. Now, there is a third line that's halfway between the nose and the chin, and this one is for the bottom of the lower lip. So this isn't for the mouth opening, this is for the bottom of the lower lip. I'm not going to bother lengthening that one up because it doesn't need to touch all the way to the edges of the face. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to zoom in a little bit here, and we're going to start focusing on drawing the eyes afterwards. So the first step in drawing the eyes is to figure out exactly how wide the eyes need to be compared to the overall width of the face. So the distance between the eyes is typically supposed to be the width of one of the eyes. So you've just got to kind of play around. So draw these lines lightly. I'm going to say probably somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch away from the center line of the face, and make sure that this gap and this gap both look the same. And then you can either use your ruler or you can just use your pencil, and you can just figure out what that width is. See how I lined up my pencil tip with one mark, lined my fingernail up with the other, and then you can go over here and you can mark that distance on the side over here. So we can double check it as well just to make sure we're precise. So we'll go ahead and do that same thing again, move it over, and if it looks accurate then we're good. Looks like I could move it out just a teeny weeny bit. Now after you're done doing that, we should be left with less than one eye width over here. If you've got room to put a whole nother eye over here, you probably need to scoot these marks further out, and then as a result make this go a little bit wider as well. So now we'll use that same trick again. We're just going to figure out exactly how wide this other eye needs to be and mark it right over here. And if I did a good job in drawing my head shape, this side and this side should look about the same in width. I think I'm a little bit off. I could probably move this out just a little bit further and then just, erase the excess. So don't think that I am perfect. I am not. I do make mistakes. And so we'll go ahead and correct that mistake there. Now, the next step is to start placing the details of the eyes. And we're going to start by drawing, I call it the sleepy sand pocket. I'm sure it has a technical name according to anatomy, but I'm just going to call it the sleepy sand pocket. And we're just going to draw it as a little C, or you could make it like a V shape, but it's just like a little backwards C and a frontward C, or a sideways facing set of V's. Now, the upper eyelid, we're going to start as a straight line. It's going to come from the end of the C shape, not from the beginning of it. And it's not going to go all the way to the halfway point of that space for the eye. We're going to stop before you get to the halfway point. We're also going to do that same thing over here to the other side. You want to try to keep the angles looking the same. If they look a little off, then adjust. If one looks a little longer than the other, then fix it. And then we're going to extend that line downwards until we go where this vertical line meets this horizontal line. So we're not going up to here, we're not going down to here, we're going to where those two lines meet. And you're just going to make it another straight line. Now, why start with straight lines instead of curves? Well, it's easier to start out with a straight line because it's easier to make sure that they go the proper length and the proper angle. Then afterwards, you can just smooth it out and erase the point at the top. And then we're going to do the same thing over here to this side. So we're just going to extend this line all the way to where the vertical meets the horizontal over here. And then smooth out that curve. And if one eye looks like it's open a little bit more than the other, just make some fine-tuning adjustments until the two eyes look the same. I think I've got it pretty good. I think this one maybe feels a little bit more open than that one, but not by much, and I can just make some small little adjustments to bring up those lines just a teeny bit. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to start working on the lower eyelid. Now the lower eyelid is not an eyelid that moves, it stays still, and the lower eyelid has less of an angle to it compared to the upper. And this line is going to be going a little bit further too. So we're going to go a little bit further, probably to the halfway point in the middle of the eye, before it changes direction to go up here. And remember, we want to have it meet right here so that you get like a little point at the end. And then we'll do the same thing to the other side. Allow it to drop just slightly, stop it about at the halfway point, and then angle upwards to meet at the corner of the eye. If you do have a corner down there that's really hard, if it looks like a sharp triangle, you can smooth out. Mine was pretty smooth already, so I'm not going to bother. And then afterwards, we can erase that eye line that we drew that goes through the middle of that space. Now, that sleepy sand pocket has kind of a different color to it, and it's kind of a fleshy pink color, and it doesn't go too far. So we're going to visualize where the eyeball would be underneath the skin, and we're going to use the curve of the eyeball to help to determine the curve that we would need for where that sleepy sand hits the eyeball. On the other side, that curve is going to go in the opposite direction because your eyeball is curving around like this, so that sleepy sand pocket will just curve in that direction of that eyeball. Now, after you've got that done, we're going to begin working on the eyelids next. And the eyelids are going to be just a short distance from the eye opening. Now, everybody has different shapes of eyes. Everybody has different shapes of eyelids. On some people, their eyebrow ridge cuts off part of the view of the eye. If you're of Asian descent or partial Asian descent, then you may have an epithanic fold, which also changes the appearance a little bit. So don't be afraid of making it look a little bit different if you feel like your eyes don't look the same as this. I'm going to erase this little line right here, just getting rid of that line that helped us to place the corner of the eye. We don't need it anymore. And that way, when we finish drawing the eyelid over here, it doesn't feel like it's stopping at a straight up and down line. Then we'll do the same thing over here. Now, one thing I think I didn't mention yet was that this ideal set of proportions are based on rules that were created in ancient Greece and ancient Persia. And, you know, these are things that very few people actually have. My eyes don't look like this. They don't look perfectly spaced, you know, so don't think there's anything wrong with any of you if your facial features don't match with this ideal canon of proportions determined by somebody like 2,000 years ago. You know, that's unreasonable, right? Now, what we're going to do next is we are going to be drawing the irises and the pupils. So the irises are going to be round. Try to make them as round as possible. Don't allow them to be kind of flat on the sides. You need to carefully place them so that your character doesn't look like they're wall-eyed or cross-eyed. Cross-eyed just means kind of the eyes pointing towards the center. Wall-eyed means that they're kind of pointing outwards instead. So you want to make sure that the character looks like it's looking forward. If they're not, move them apart or move them close together, whatever needs to happen in order to make that look right. So what you can do if it's only the slightest bit off is you can just thicken up the border around the outside of the iris. Usually I darken the outside of the iris just a little bit anyway, because the iris, on somebody that has lighter colored eyes, usually there's a little bit more of a dark ring around the outside. So that would be somebody with like green eyes or blue eyes or hazel eyes. If you've got dark brown eyes, you may not be able to see that slightly darker outer ring because your eyes may be too dark to see that detail. There's nothing wrong with that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be drawing the pupils. Now, you don't want to make your pupils super small. You don't want to make them super large. If they look super large, you're going to look like you've got a concussion. If you draw them super small, then it's going to make your character look like a vampire. So I try to center them perfectly in the middle of the iris, and then make them the same size and the same placement over here on the other side. Another sign of a concussion is if you've got two different sizes of pupils. So, you know, try to make those pupils look like they're equal in size. And if your distance from here to here was looking a little bit too big, if it was pushing your iris a little off center, you can just make some adjustments until you're happy with the way it looks. Now, again, for lighter colored eyes, you may be able to see some details that you can't see in darker colored eyes. Let me get us back in focus here. So on lighter colored eyes, somebody that has light brown, light blue or green or hazel eyes, you might see these lines that kind of like feel like they're pointing towards the center of the pupil. And you can layer these up quite a bit in order to give kind of a darker tone to the iris. And if you want to, you can darken up just a couple of them, or you can darken up just parts of some of those lines, and that just helps to give it a little bit more realism when it comes to drawing somebody that has lighter colored eyes. If you have darker colored eyes, just go ahead and keep layering them up until it looks almost as dark as the pupil. And then you can just shade in all the pupil, or if you want to, you can leave a little highlight in the pupil somewhere as if there's a reflection hitting it. And then we'll do the same thing over here to the other side. So we'll start drawing all those lines that help to create the texture of the iris. By the way, the size of the irises, or the pupil, is something that advertisers actually take advantage of. And so if you are looking at an advertisement, very rarely will you see somebody who's been photographed with their iris or with their pupils looking small. Usually there'll be people with irises or pupils that are looking a little bit big, because somehow subconsciously the human brain finds more people more attractive if their irises are looking a little bit bigger. So their pupils are looking a little bigger. I keep using the wrong word there. So I'd made the pupil big enough to where the person looks attractive without looking like they've gotten hit in the head. And now as soon as these eyes are looking good, we can call it quits on those. Now, you do want to make sure for the next step that you sharpen your pencil. So the reason why we're going to sharpen the pencil is because we're going to start working on eyelashes, and you need those eyelashes to be thin and detailed. So you're going to hear my pencil sharpener go off. And how you're going to start the eyelashes is by starting right in the middle of the eye at the highest point of the eye, and making, with your upper eyelid, you're going to start right from the eye opening. And then you're going to keep layering in more eyelashes. As they get further towards the center of the face, you're going to make them tilt towards the center of the face and be a little bit curvier. So you're just going to curve and tilt these lines like this. And then you're going to go in the opposite direction with your tilt and your curve as you go towards the outside portion of the face. Now, an interesting thing that a lot of people kind of can feel is like, oh, well, you know, longer, darker eyelashes, that's kind of a feminine trait. And it's actually kind of just the opposite. Because guys tend to grow darker, thicker body hair, they also tend to have darker, thicker eyelashes as well. And so don't be afraid of drawing a male character that has thick, dark eyelashes. That's actually quite natural. That's just kind of how it works. So that is how you're going to be doing it. You're going to layer it up a little bit more so it looks a little bit fuller. And really important is making that slight curve and that slight tilt to these eyelashes. That helps to increase the realism. Now, for anyone who's done eye makeup before, you probably will have noticed that the lower eyelashes are not as full. There's fewer of them. There's more space between them. And they don't actually start right from the eye opening. The lower eyelashes actually have a little bit of skin between them and the eye opening. So when we're working on the lower eyelashes, it's going to be very much the same, but there's going to be fewer of them. I'm pressing down less hard so that they turn out a little bit lighter. I'm adding more space between these lower eyelashes. And the other thing that happens is they actually end before you get to the corners of the eye. So you got to be very delicate with your pressure, and you really want to try to make them look fewer, more spaced out, and less dark. So that's our first eye finished, and now we can move on to the other eye. By the way, there is no fold like at the top eyelid up here for the lower eyelid because it doesn't open and close. However, some people have just a little bit of a line right here. When you get older, you get more of those lines. So you can add that line or you can just leave it off, and this line is the one I'm talking about. Now, on the other eye, we're going to do the exact same thing. So you can either pause and just do it on your own, or you can watch again while I do the same thing again. So I'm going to start at the highest point of the eye with a straight up and down line, then simply curve and tilt as I go off towards the center of the face with these lines. And then the change of angle happens as we go on the other side. So I'm going to tilt and curve in the direction of the side of the face as we go on the other side of the eye. And then we are simply going to be layering up more of these eyelashes so that we have a nice full set of eyelashes across the whole eye. If you need to sharpen again, sharpen again. Sometimes you don't have to sharpen immediately. Sometimes if you get a little bit of a flat part on the tip of your pencil, you can rotate your pencil between your fingers and you can use the newest, sharpest tip of your pencil. And then just remember, for the lower eyelid, you're going to start it the same way, but there's going to be more spaces between the eyelashes. There's going to be a little bit of skin between the eyelashes and the eye opening, and there's going to be fewer eyelashes, and they're going to stop before you get to the corner of the eye. So they're noticeably lighter and less dense and less going towards the corners of the eye. If you want to add that little hint of a line underneath the lower eyelid, you can do that. Okay, so we've finished with our eyes, and the only thing left to do before moving on to the nose is to get the eyebrows. Eyebrows happen at different heights for different people. My eyebrows are super close to my eye opening. Many people have them up higher. So you go ahead and put the eyebrows wherever looks good to you, as long as it's not too high up on the forehead. So I'm going to start making my eyebrow, and one thing you'll notice if you look around at other people is eyebrows are a little bit wider than the eye. So you can just start with a real light line like this to help you to place where your eyebrow is going to start. Make sure that it feels symmetrical. So make sure that one side looks like the other, unless you're having your character do the rock eyebrow where one's tilted upwards and the other one's looking normal. Feels like this one was going a little bit high up, so I dropped it a little bit so it was symmetrical with the other side. Now, if you want to do a more delicate shaped eyebrow, like a plucked eyebrow or a tweezed eyebrow or threaded or whatever, you can do that. So if you want to go for more of a sculpted eyebrow shape, you can do that. If you would rather, you can have more of a natural eyebrow. I would consider making them the same unless you want to, do a face that changes from male to female on the sides or something. I myself shape my eyebrows a little bit, but they're still chunky like this. And draw them light. And the reason why is because once you start to add in the hair, then you can kind of start a little bit before the line or right at the line and go a little bit past it. And you can actually just kind of make that line disappear into the eyebrow that you're drawing as you're adding in the texture. Now, you can look at your own eyebrows in a mirror or in your phone by going into selfie camera mode or something and see how your eyelashes or your eyebrow hairs are kind of growing. Mine actually grow towards each other as I get into like the end of my eyebrow here, so that's the reason why I made it do that on my drawing. So you just kind of look at your own eyebrows or at a neighbor's eyebrows if you want, and kind of make the hairs look like they're drawn in a natural way. You can make them cross over each other a little bit, that's fine. Not many people really like comb their eyelash or their eyebrows, so don't be afraid of letting lines cross over each other too. And regardless of which style of eyelash you're choosing to draw, do that same thing. So you don't necessarily have to have, a skinny side and a thick side. They can both be skinny, they can both be thick. Now, if you want your character to look more sympathetic, by the way, you can raise this side a little bit higher. So if this corner is higher than this corner, it makes the person look more sympathetic. If this corner is higher up than this corner, the person will look a little bit more wicked. They call that a femme fatale eyebrow because that's how they used to do the eyebrows for the bad girls in old movies in the 1920s and 30s, for instance. All right, so that is the conclusion of how to draw the eyes, and now we're going to move on to the nose. Now, for the nose, we're going to start out with the bridge of the nose, which is going to happen roughly halfway between the corner of your eye and the center of your face on each side. So we're just going to make it come from about right here, because that seems like halfway between here and here. And we're going to make it aim roughly at your eyebrow. We'll make the same thing happen over on the other side, halfway between here and here, and draw it going like that. If one side looks thicker than the other, adjust them. And then these next lines we're going to draw real light because these ones are going to go away. You just want to drop a straight up and down line from the corner of your eye. If you're struggling with doing that by hand, use a ruler. We're using the corner of the eye, not the end of the eyebrow, or the end of the eyelid, I mean. So I'm dropping that straight down from the corner of the eye, not the corner of the eyelid. Adjust a little bit if it looks a little off center. If it looks off center, that could be the fault of the eyes being a little different in spacing, or you might have let that line tilt a little bit while you're drawing it. And what we're going to do next is we're going to move down to the bottom of the nose, and we're going to add a curve for the ball of the nose. You don't want to make this super small, okay? You want it to go pretty wide. And then we can put in your nostril curve. So this is for the outside of your nostril. This first half is going to be a short line, and it's going to be a little bit longer on the upper half. Do the same thing on the other side. Try to make them look symmetrical. And then we will make this curve around and have a nostril hole attached. Now, I mentioned before that not everybody's face is going to look like what we draw, right? On some people, you can see the nostrils, the nostril holes. On some people, you can't. On some people, they look really round. On some, they look more like ovals, like what I've just drawn. So there's no rule that says it has to be any particular way. That's just the example that I'm creating for you today. Now, in the top half of the nose up here, you've got a bony portion. This is an actual part of your skull. And you can feel this. If you put your fingers right at the top of your nose, you can feel the bony portion right here. But then below that, there's the cartilaginous part of your nose. Cartilage is just a soft, more flexible material. It's actually what forms the bodies of sharks. Sharks don't have bones, they just have cartilage. And so you can wiggle that bottom half of your nose around. And you'll notice that I made this curve, so it's a little bit smaller here, and it curves and becomes a little bit wider near the bottom, pointing your eyes at that transition between the ball of the nose and the nostril hole. So you can see I did the same thing on the other side. It's kind of pointing at where that transition from the ball of the nose starts to curve around into the nostril hole. And if you got a big distance between your nostril hole and the nostril curve out here, just kind of bring that hole out a little bit more. If the nose is looking too skinny, make it look a little wider. All right, now we have finished with the basic lines for the nose, and what I'm going to show you next is how to draw the mouth. So for the mouth, we're going to drop a line coming from the center point of the eyes. And again, this line will get erased, so you're not going to want to keep it forever. This is just a temporary line. And you're going to do the same thing from the other side, halfway into the eyes. Draw a nice straight up and down line. And then this is going to be a line that your mouth is not going to touch. Okay, I know that sounds funny, but you are not going to quite make your mouth touch this line. Your mouth should stop a little bit short of it. If one distance looks a little bigger than the other, just adjust it until those two lines coming down from the center of the eye have an equal gap all the way from here to here and from here to here. Now, I mentioned before that the mouth itself, the lower lip is going to be where we're going to have this line. So this is for the bottom of the lower lip. This is not the mouth opening. Okay? Then above that, we've got the mouth opening. So this is the actual crack between your two lips. And then right up here, we're going to draw your upper lip. Now, you notice I gave myself some space here. There's that crease that happens between your upper lip and your nose. We got to leave room for that. So what we're going to do next is we're going to make the shallowest, flattest V you've ever seen. So it just barely tips upwards. It's almost a straight left and right line. And then we're going to draw a longer line that comes downwards by as much as that one came upwards. So in other words, this point right here should be about the same height as this point. If you make the outside corner of your mouth too low, it's going to make that person look like they're having a bad day. It's going to look like they're frowning or having a sad face. And then your upper lip, the top of your upper lip, starts on that line. And then you can just start it as a straight line if you want, but then you can give it a little bit of curve if you want to, so it feels more natural. So again, you can draw it as a straight line to start with, connecting up with the corner of the mouth, and then you can give it just a little bit of curve if you'd like. And then that lower lip is going to point towards the corner of the mouth. I'm not going to connect it all the way. On a lot of people, if you see somebody without makeup, on a lot of people, as you get closer to the corner of the mouth, the skin tone for the face starts to slowly turn more pink as it goes this way. So there's not a really clear definition for where the lower lip ends when it comes to the color. Now you can also play around with the shape of the lip if you want to give the person more of a squared off shape on the lip. You can do that. So remember, everybody's mouth, everybody's face in general are unique and different. So don't be afraid of, making some little tweaks and adjustments to give the person a fuller lower lip if you want to. If you feel like the upper lip was too small and you want to move the mouth line down a little bit, you can do that. So you can always go in and make adjustments to make a more full upper lip or a more full lower lip, or whatever you think looks nicest for your character. As long as the bottom of the lower lip is halfway between the nose and the chin, that right there, you're good. Now notice I did not touch to that line. I did not touch the corner of the mouth to this line, so we're good there. And I can look at the distance between the corner of the mouth and those lines to make sure that my mouth is the same width on the left and right. And then the last major detail here before we start working on shading in areas of the face would be doing the chin. So real close to the mouth line, you could even make it touch to the lower lip if you wanted, but real close to that lower lip, you're just going to draw a slight curve to represent the curvature of the chin. You don't want to make it down here. That would be a very small chin. Okay, so here or somewhere near there, not too low. So let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit, and we're going to look at the overall face and maybe get rid of some of our guidelines. All right, so when we look at the overall face, I think the facial features look well drawn. So I'm going to start getting rid of these guidelines that came from the corner of the eyes and from the center of the eyes and went down. I'm also going to get rid of the lines that we don't need anymore for the center of the face and for the nose line here. You'll notice, however, I'm going to leave the nose line right where it touches to the edge of the jawline. And remember, that's going to be a line that we're going to use to help to place the ears here in a few moments. We can also get rid of that center line here. We can get rid of the eye line going horizontally here. And I'm going to leave the eye line, remember, as we get towards the corner of the face, because that's going to help us to place where the ears are going to be. Okay, so I left the eye line here and the nose line here and here, so we can place the ears more easily. Now, I know for a lot of you, you're looking at it and you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of forehead. But remember, there's going to be hair on top of part of this forehead. So don't think that this is just going to remain huge like this unless you want to draw a bald person, which is fine. So we're going to zoom in again, and we're going to work on the ears next. So the ears are going to start from the side of the face at that line that we gave ourselves here, and then they're going to curve upwards, and they're going to come as high as the eye opening over here. And then we're going to bring them around. Usually there's a little bit of a bump on the side, so you can have that. And then the earlobe is going to come as low as the bottom of the nose line. So we're going to make our earlobe right about there. Now, everybody has different ears, just like how everybody has different eyes and different mouths. So don't think that anything I'm going to show you is a rule for how to draw everyone's ears. These are guidelines to help you to figure out a starting place when you're first learning to draw faces. And then we're going to do the same thing over here to the other side. So we're going to try to make it start at the same place, go up to the same height, up to the eye opening height over here. I'm trying to keep it the same distance away from the side of the face, and still adding in that little lump on the side, getting the earlobe in the right place, and connecting it all together. Now, you'll probably feel like the ears are sticking out a little bit too far, but that's okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to widen up the head behind the ears anyway. So don't worry about that. That will be adjusted to make the ears not look like they're sticking out so far. If you actually feel behind your head, you can feel that the back corners of your head right behind your ears are wider than your head at the sides of your forehead, kind of where the eyebrows end. So you can see that there is some room to make the head wider back here. Now, the next step that we're going to work on for the ears, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit further here, is we're going to start with this little tab that attaches to your cheek. Some people get this thing pierced. Okay? And then we're going to start working on the outside flap of your ear. And you can follow that shape using your fingertip. You can shove your finger into that little pocket right there, and you can follow it around. And it's going to go like this. And there's actually a part that connects up with that tab that's the other side of this outer ridge. So this outer ridge actually curves around, and then it goes into a deeper pocket inside of the deepest part of your ear. So you can draw that deepest part of your ear afterwards, and it's going to connect up with that tab. And you can use your fingertip to follow all these shapes as they occur on your own ear. And then that outer tab goes around the outside, and on some people, the other side of this ridge blocks your view, of where that outer flap goes, and then it comes out from underneath. And then there's a ridge of cartilage right here that basically separates your earlobe from the rest of your ear. On many people, they have like a little shadowy pocket right about here that comes out from behind that flap. Now, I know I showed you that pretty quickly, but remember, you can speed down this video or speed up or slow down this video in YouTube. So feel free to slow down the demonstration, to pause it whenever you need to, and draw it step by step. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to start to shade in. Actually, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to show you how to draw it one more time on the other side, and then we'll start working on the shading of the head. So remember that our first step is to draw the little flap that connects to the side of your cheek. All right, and then after that's been drawn, you're going to draw that flap around the outside of your ear. And remember that it goes like this, and it starts to go into that darker hole in the inside of your ear. And the other side of that ridge comes from that tab that attaches to the side of your cheek. And then you can go ahead and start making the outside ridge of that dark area come around like this, and it's going to hook up with that tab attached to your cheek. The other side of this ridge will be this line right here. And remember, that's the line that the flap here will go behind. And this ridge will come around. It's a little piece of cartilage that separates that earlobe from the upper portion of your ear. And this outer flap up here will come out from behind it right about there. And the last detail is just the little shadow that's coming out from behind that flap in your ear right there. All right, now, when it comes to shading in the ears, the darkest area is going to be in here. And that outer flap, as it goes into this hole, kind of disappears into the darkness. So we can just make it kind of dissolve away into the darkness and become a part of that dark area in there. Another dark area in the ear will be in here. Not quite as dark, but close. And down here. And then you can go ahead and throw a light value over all the inside parts of the ear, everything except for the everything except for the ear lobe and outside flap. And because this is farther from the front of your face, we're now going to throw a shadow, a light shadow over all of it. And that's just to show that it's not in the very front of your face. It's back a little distance. And I'm going to show you how to do that one more time. So if you need to see it again, you can either rewind or you can watch it now. So the darkest area of the ear on the left side of this drawing will be in here. Remember, this outside flap that goes into there kind of disappears into shadow. This will be the next darkest area, although not as dark. And we'll have a little bit of extra shadow right here and right over here. We'll throw a light value over everything except for the earlobe and the outer flap of the ear. And then a light value over the whole thing now. All right, so I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so we can see the overall effect that shading in the ears has had. Yes, it does push them back into space a little bit, so that works. I think what we're going to do next is we're going to focus on the sleepy sand pocket and then on the nose. So you're just going to throw a real light shadow here because that is more of a fleshy tone inside of that sleepy sand pocket. And so it's going to be a little bit darker than the whites of your eyes. Now, for the bridge of the nose here, we're going to throw a shadow that starts at this line, and it's going to get a little bit lighter as it goes towards the eye. So you're just using nice light pressure. You don't need this to be super dark. And we're going to follow alongside the nose here. Now, this is going to be a very generic light source. It's kind of like a slight light coming from above, casting a shadow on either side of the face that's equal. If you're working from an actual photograph of somebody, you're going to want to use the light source that you see in that photograph. So you've noticed I've made the shadow travel alongside that bony part of the nose and the cartilaginous part of the nose, and it's going to stop and curve around that nostril curve right here. That helps to define where the nostril curve is without actually needing a line there. We're going to have a nice dark shadow inside the nostril hole, and that shadow that was alongside of the cartilaginous part will curve around and define the part of your nose for the ball of the nose that curves under, because nobody's nose comes to an exact point. There's going to be a shadow as it curves under. And then you're going to throw a little bit of a shadow, the same darkness, over your nostril hole, and then traveling up along the side of the nostril curve. And this is just pushing the highlight to the top of your nostril curve right there. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. So starting with kind of a medium shadow right over here, getting it lighter as it goes towards the eye, following alongside the bony part of the nose and the cartilaginous part of the nose. And remember, you're getting your shadows lighter as you go further away from the line. And it's helping to define the top of the nostril. You're throwing a little bit of the same shadow above the nostril and on the underside of the nose on this side. And then nice dark shadow inside the nostril hole. And that shadow coming up the side of the nostril curve, helping to define the highlight in this area at the top. All right, so what we can do next is we can start to look at the eye socket just a little bit, because everybody's got an eye socket and there may be a little bit of a shadow that we need to define just for the beginning of the eye socket. Now, if you want to make the person look older or more stressed out, you can make the eye socket more dark. It can kind of go further over, but we're going to keep this person a little bit younger and more youthful looking. So we're not going to get too crazy with the eye socket. And this shadow for the eye socket is going to kind of like point towards that little fold we gave for the lower eyelid, okay, and connect up with it essentially. All right, so our next step is going to be to add some shadow underneath the nose. So underneath the nose, you're going to have some shadow because your nose hangs out over the area above your upper lip, and therefore casts a shadow on the area below. So we're just going to draw a real flat kind of V area shadow that's underneath there. And we can even make it a little bit darker right at the top, right at the base of the ball of the nose, just to kind of separate the ball of the nose from that shadow. That way you can tell the difference between those two areas. And then you can give yourself that crease that goes between the nose and the upper lip. On the ridge here, we can throw a little shadow on the other side of the ridge for that crease to show that it catches a little bit of a highlight right at the edge. I can even erase it away a little bit more if I made it go away too much. And then you can just kind of fade out that shadow as you go further away. All right, now for the lips, the upper lip actually angles inwards. And so the upper lip is pretty much all going to be in shadow. So I'm going to throw kind of a medium shadow over the upper lip. It's going to tilt my lines are as I'm drawing the shadows. And if you want to leave some lines a little darker, that's okay, because everybody's lips have some little cracks in them. And we're going to tilt this line more and more as we go towards the corner of the mouth. And then if you want to make some of those little cracks in your lips a little bit more dominant, a little bit more visible, you can do that. And then we'll do the same thing, tilting towards the other side as we're going further over this way. And because it goes further and further in towards the mouth opening, you can even make it a little bit darker right near the mouth opening, just to show that it's getting more and more far from your light source. Now, your lower lip is a little bit different because the lower lip curves from shadow into light and then back into shadow. So the lower lip, I'm going to make very light curving lines, and this is kind of like representing not only the cracks in the lips, but also showing, you know, how it's curving from shadow into light, back into shadow. After I've got those basic lines, then I'll throw a little extra shadow in there. So I'll throw a little bit of extra shadow along the bottom half of the lower lip to show that that's curving out of the light. And I'm going to throw a little bit of shadow right at the mouth opening on the lower lip, right here, to show that it's curving from shadow into light. So by adding these shadows and trying to minimize the appearance of the original lines that we drew, we're getting closer and closer to more of a realistic look for this generic face portrait. Now, what if you want to have some of those lines that come like, kind of like smile lines? What if you want to have some of those lines? Yeah, you can do that. You can make it come from the top of the nostril curve right here. You can have it come beside but not touching the mouth, so you can make it come up to that line that we drew from the center line of the face. Why is it not touching to the mouth? Well, because there's a little extra muscle that's right here that we might even see a little shadow of. And then you can throw a little shadow between your nostril curve and your smile line. So let's go down just a little bit here, and I'm going to zoom out just a touch so we can see the whole effect. The last areas we're going to work on are going to be the chin and the cheekbones, and then we'll go up to the top of the head and work on the sides of the forehead and stuff. So for the chin, all you're going to do is you're going to draw a really light line that connects from your chin line up towards that smile line. We're drawing it real light because it's not going to remain a line. It's going to become a shadow. Now, chins don't come to a point on the bottom, so chins actually start to curve under, so we can add a little bit of a shadow at the bottom of the chin here. Let it get lighter as it comes up higher. And we can bring that shadow along the whole jawline, because the whole jawline curves under. So we can bring the shadow, and it's a gradation, and make it get lighter as it goes away from the jawline. Now, if you're having problems controlling the darkness of your pencil, because like I'm using a pretty dark drawing pencil, if you're having problems controlling the darkness of your pencil, you can always upgrade to one of my 3H pencils, which will give you a lighter mark more easily. So if you're having problems, if it's going too dark for you too quickly, don't be afraid of just coming up real quick and checking out one of those harder pencils that'll give you a lighter mark with the same amount of using the same amount of pressure. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the shadow cup the sides of the chin over here. So it's helping to define the sides of the chin, and I'm just going to continue to fade out that gradation until I get to that line that I drew. So on the other side, doing the same thing, just kind of making that shadow fade out as we go up higher until it just stops right at that line. There is something called a cleft chin, where there's kind of like a dent in the chin. It's actually part of the bone structure on some people. If you want to give your character a cleft chin, you can do that. If you want to leave it like a regular old chin, you can do that too. And we're going to add a little shadow that goes between the lower lip and the chin. That's just going to become a part of these shadows that we've already defined. So again, I'm trying to reduce the look of the individual lines used to define the facial features and trying to make it more about shading than about lines. The lines were just there to help to define where the shadows would be, but we're not going to really leave those lines as looking like lines because that makes it look a little less realistic. Now, when we come up into the cheekbone area here, some people have more pronounced cheekbones, some people don't. So I'm going to give a little angle coming from about where the center of the tab is right here and about the same place on the other side. And we're going to have that gradation along the edge of the jawline. Just come out until it hits to there. And just have it dissolve away. It's not going to be straight up and down right here, but it's kind of at a slight angle. Now, some people, and I'm one of them, have a shadow that connects from the eye socket to that cheekbone, where that cheekbone kind of changes direction right here. So if you want to draw that, you can. I'm not going to make that mandatory. I'll show it looking not that way on the other side, so you can decide. If you want to give more of a pronounced eye socket being visible, you can do that. So if you ever want to do that, you can. I'm not going to make it mandatory. All right, so we are almost done with the face. All we've got to do from here is just to throw a little bit of shadow in the bridge of the nose. So the bridge of the nose angles inwards as it goes towards, the corners of your eye. So we're just going to add a little bit of shadow across the bridge of the nose, like this. And then as your nose starts to poke out from the base of the bridge of your nose, it starts to come into the light more. So let's zoom out a bit and see where we're at on this overall drawing. So it's looking pretty good. We are getting kind of a 3D effect. If you want to enhance the 3D effect, you can always throw a little bit more shadow along the jawline edge here and fade it out, and that'll give it more of a three-dimensional look to the face. If you want to give your person some kind of dimples or something like that, you can do that, whatever works for you. All right, now what we're going to do last here is I'm going to show you how to draw some of the shadows for the sides and of the head going up towards the top of the head, and then hair is going to be an optional feature that you can choose to work with or not. So hair is optional, you decide, bald head or hair head. So what we're going to do is, if you feel along the sides of your forehead, you'll feel that there's this bony ridge that kind of goes like this. And by the way, you can get rid of this line anytime you want, and any of these other ones that you don't need anymore. Obviously put back in the shadow if any of your shadow got erased away. Probably should have done that before I did your shading. So we're going to do that same thing on the opposite side over here. So we're just getting that ridge that goes along. It's kind of the transition between your forehead and the sides of your head. And then we're just going to throw a gradation along the edges of the head that are going to fade out as we go towards that ridge. Now, if your light's coming from above, then the shadows along the side of the face are actually going to get a little bit lighter as they go up higher. So I don't want to go and make the top of the head dark all the way around. We're going to let that shadow kind of get brighter until it just disappears as we go around the top of the head. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So just bringing that same gradation that we created before in and fading it out as we go towards that transition between the forehead and the side of the head. Now, I mentioned before that we needed to widen up the back of the skull a little bit, so let's do that right now. I actually forgot to do that. So I'm going to widen up the back of the skull a little bit so it comes out behind the ears. So let's do that, and then we'll just bring our shadow out to that. There we go. Easy. If I went too dark right here, I'll just erase some of that darkness. And do that same thing that I had on the other side. Now, the last mandatory details for this drawing are going to be adding a neck and a little bit of shoulders. So I'm going to zoom out farther here, and I'm going to adjust the paper so that we're looking kind of at the bottom portion of it down here. And the way the neck is going to work is the neck is going to start from a little bit lower than this junction between the ear and the jawline. So I'm going to start the neck right about here. If your character feels like its neck is like way too bulky and they look like they're lifting too many weights, then obviously you can push these lines in a little bit further. Now these lines are almost straight up and down, but they do tilt inwards just a little bit. Not a lot though, Okay, just the slightest tilt inwards. If you make the tilt too much, then the neck is going to feel really wobbly. Okay? And then this is the big cord of muscle that runs alongside your neck. So we're just going to draw the other side of that big, thick cord of muscle along the side of your neck. And that leaves us this space in the middle, which is going to be for the larynx, the voice box type area. So we can make them connect down here, which is going to be like the center of the clavicle. That's the collarbone. The collarbone is going to angle upwards slightly from where these two lines meet, along that little curve. And then your shoulder muscle is going to come out a little bit lower than your chin from behind that thick cord of muscle along the sides of your neck. So you don't want to make this line too flat, but you also don't want to make it look too slumped. If you make it too much of an angle, then it's going to look like the person is, very defeated. They're going to have kind of like weak feeling shoulders. If you have room to show the tops of the arm over here, you can. If you don't, no problem. Now, I'm not going to draw all the little fine details of a neck because necks are super hard to draw. There is a little bit of kind of a flare that happens down here, so I'm going to add that. And there is also kind of like this ridge that runs along here in your larynx area, your voice box area. If you're drawing a guy, you can draw an Adam's apple. If you're not, leave that off. That is one of the few details that is gender specific. Okay. And then we can just work on the shading. So I'm going to add a shadow that's going from the jawline on top of the neck. That's going to be the first thing I'm going to do because that's the transition, like the paunch, the area where the fleshy area underneath your jaw that kind of like connects your jaw to the neck. So I'm going to draw that paunch in here just as a little skinny shadow. And then I'm going to have this shadow for the side of the voice box, kind of meet up with it. Now my neck feels a little off center. I'm not going to worry about that. Just do the best job you can. And then I'm just going to fade out that shadow as you go further towards the center of the larynx voice box area. If you feel your actual center of your neck, there's actually a lot of ridges in this. Okay? And then you can throw a little shadow underneath the Adam's apple if you're drawing a guy. Remember, Adam's apple, guys only. Sometimes people that are going through like gender transitions and things like that, if they're going male to female, will actually have that removed. And then we're going to basically just leave a highlight in the middle of these thick cords of muscle that form the side of the neck. So leaving a highlight in the middle there. And you'll notice I'm just kind of letting my shadows kind of fade out as they go down lower. And then we'll throw a little bit of a shadow along this side and this side. And then we can throw a little bit of a shadow between this, right underneath like this big muscle right here. So that, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else, that's how you draw a basic head, neck, and shoulders. If you want to draw a little shadow under the collarbone, you can do that. All right, thank you for your attention. Remember, work at your own pace. Do the best job you can. If you need to pause and kind of re-watch things a couple of times in order to get the gist of how to do something properly, then do that and make it look as good as possible. If you want to add hair, I'll probably show that the next class session. Thank you very much. Have a great day.